Hello, my name is James Womack, Senior Pastor at Destiny Church here in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm delighted to be with you guys on today just to share very briefly about assimilation in the local church. The privilege of believers in Jesus Christ is to connect with people for the cause of Christ. Our goal when it comes to having a first-time guest is to turn that first-time guest into a second-time guest, and turn a second-time guest into a regular attendee, and then a regular attendee into a member in our local churches. We say, well, Pastor, how in the world does that process happen? It happens by the Holy Spirit of God, but it also happens by churches being intentional about moving people from one step to the next step. Today I just want to share with you about assimilation. I want to share with you the why, the what, and the how of assimilation. It's not a perfect model, but yet it is still a model that you can use at your church and adapt it for your purposes. Number one, I want to talk about why assimilation. Assimilation is simply biblical hospitality. In the book of John, God calls us to be hospitable toward one another. And very often when people come to our churches, they come feeling a little bit nervous. They come not knowing anybody if they hadn't been invited by a friend. And they come feeling like strangers. Our privilege in assimilation is to be hospitable. That means to approach people who are strangers and to help them be treated like family or friends, but not as somebody who's not known. Everybody wants to go to a place where everybody knows their name, and they're not just the same. So I want to encourage you guys to be hospitable, to put a smile on your face. And when first-time guests come to your church, they'll get the red carpet treatment and not the dirty carpet treatment. So I want to encourage you guys to give people the red carpet treatment when they come to your church. So why assimilation? Number one, God commends it. The Bible talks about biblical hospitality. Number two, there's a relational vacuum in our world. People just aren't treated nice anymore. And people are dying and hungry for sincere, authentic people to connect with. Number three, people really have many options as to where they worship. They don't have to come to our house of worship. They don't have to come to our church. We want to make it special when they come to our church. We want to let them know we are thankful and we are grateful that you chose to come and worship with us, to bring your family, to come and hear the word that we have to share, to come and meet the people who are a part of our congregation, and to come and, yes, check us out to see if we'll be a good place to plant your family, to plant your life, and to grow in Jesus Christ. Number four, people get stuck just attending. People come to a church one time. I like the pastor. I like the scenery. I like the people. And they'll just come and just sit in the church. But they don't understand. You know what? There's another step you could take. We want to encourage them in assimilation to take that next step. But we've got to encourage them, prod them, and make it clear on what those next steps are. And then finally, people don't have a concept of what it means to take a next step in their spiritual walk. Traditionally, people just come to church, and after a while, people just assume that you're spiritually mature, you're studying your Bible, you're serving, you're giving, you're praying, you're obeying God. And we shouldn't assume those things. So assimilation is about being intentional about connecting people with our processes, helping move them all the way to the point of maturity. Well, what is assimilation? Assimilation is the process of moving people from first-time guests to connected members. You say, well, Pastor, we can't force anybody to do anything. No, we don't want you to force anybody to do anything. But we do want to be clear and be intentional about communicating what your next steps could look like. Well, who's involved in assimilation? We often think it's just the hospitality team. Those who are on the hospitality team, they're the only ones who are involved in hospitality and the only ones involved in assimilation. The reality is there are at least 8 different groups of people who should be involved with assimilation. Number one, it's every member in your congregation. Every time they invite somebody, every time they bring somebody, they're involved in the assimilation process. Number two, it's the people in the parking lot. The people in the parking lot are part of your assimilation process. You say parking lot? Yes. What better than to greet somebody in the parking lot when they come to your church with a wonderful smile? You've got mothers who've been wrestling with kids. You've got dads who are just getting off work. You've got people who've had a rough week. You've got husband and wives who've been fighting just to come to church. What better than the first thing that you see as soon as you open the parking lot is a smiling person, a warm smile, and somebody welcoming you to the congregation. A third area is your website. Your website participates in your assimilation process. In our well-connected world today, People normally just don't do a cold drop-in on your church. They've normally talked to somebody, and they've gone to your website to hit the About Us button. They want to learn about the pastor. They want to know about what your mission is, your vision is, what kind of church you are. They look at all the pictures on your website. They see what's there for their kids. They try finding out about some of the sermons and how the pastor teaches. Your website is also a part of the assimilation process. Then you come to the door and you have your greeters. Your greeters are a part of your assimilation process. Remember, guys, greeters aren't there just to talk to one another and to greet people who are already part of the family. Greeters are there to greet people who are part of the family, but also people who are not part of the family. When you see a new person come to your church, the greeters ought to be smiling, shaking their hands, giving them directions. And then once they come into your lobby area, into your vestibule, whatever you call it. We call it the spot here at our church. Once people hit the spot, there ought to be a host there. And the host is there just to give directions, walk their children to their class, show adults where to go, let them know where the restrooms are. Those things are so very important. So first you have your parking lot attendants, you have your website, you have your greeters, you have your host, then you have your ushers. When people come to your church, it's important to have somebody to help them understand where they should sit. I know what you're saying, Pastor. They're free to sit anywhere. But guys, when people come to your church for the first time, they're not sure where they should sit. They're not sure where the sacred seats are and where the children sit, where the youth sit, where the adults sit. So it's important to have an usher there, a smiling usher, to help direct them and let them know where they ought to be seated. And then when you come there, you've got people who come around and do offering. They ought to be smiling because they're also part of the overall team. Then you have your hospitality team. Those are the people who set up orange juice, set up water, set up coffee, put out some donuts, put out some danishes, put out some breadsticks, whatever you want to put out for people. Your hospitality team. They are there to make sure that people feel comfortable. How great it would be when people came into your sanctuary or came into your church. They're able to get a warm drink when it's hot. They're able to get a cold refreshment when it's hot outside. So they want to make sure that the hospitality team is part of that as well. Then you have your facilities team. Your facilities team is to make sure it's a warm environment and a welcoming environment. Everything is clean. We'll talk more about that later. Then you have your resource team. People who pass out books, first-time guests, pass out CDs, all those type of things. Your resource team is also part of your assimilation team. People want to know more about your church. They want to know what your ministry is involved in. They want to know how they can get involved. They want to know what's exciting at your church. You need to have a resource table to help provide resources for your first-time guest. And then lastly, it's your assimilation team. Once people leave service and once they go home, we want to follow up with them. So you need an assimilation team to follow up with people. You say, well, Pastor, the church secretary sends out a letter. In this day and time, a letter is common. No one's really impressed by a letter. What can you do beyond a simple letter to let people know that their visit was important when they came to your church? It's important, guys, to recognize that every member of your church is part of your assimilation team. It's also important to recognize that those in your parking lot, they're part of your assimilation team. Greeters, they're part of your assimilation team. Not talking to one another, but talking to those first-time guests. Host, they're part of your assimilation team. They help direct, they help guide, help people feel comfortable when they come to your church. Then you have your ushers. It's important to be greeted and seated and to make sure they understand they're part of your assimilation team. Your hospitality team, those who put out coffee, those who put out orange juice, those who put out water, they're part of your hospitality team. Taking that extra step. Also remember your facilities team, making sure everything is neat, clean, smells good. They're part of your assimilation team. And then you have the official resource team. They're part of the team. And your hospitality and assimilation team, they're also part of the team. I want to encourage you guys to break up now, talk to one another, and dialogue about the different teams you already have and the teams that need to be developed at your church. In our next section, we're going to talk about some more specifics and how this looks at Destiny Church. Thank you so much. God bless you. Hello again. It's been expressed by Bill Hybels that excellence honors God, but also inspires people. When it comes to our assimilation process and how we treat first-time guests, remember guys, you've got 7 to 10 minutes to make a first impression with somebody. How will you treat a first-time guest? I want to talk to you guys now about some specific things that we do here at Destiny Church, some things that can be a model for you for how you want to plan how you treat first-time guests at your church. I want to talk about, first off, I want to talk about the assimilation that makes sense. No, not that kind of sense. The 5 senses. Number 1 is sight. When people come to your church, the first thing they're looking at is the grass manicured, how things look on the outside. They're looking for signage. Number 2, they want to know how things look on the inside. When they come in, they aren't per se asking if things are new or old, although they are checking it out. They want to know more so, are things clean? Are things organized? Is there too much clutter around? They want to know, number 1, how do things look on the outside? But then number 2, how do things look on the inside? Number 3, people are looking about the things you put into their hand. Are they high quality materials? Have they been done with excellence? Have they been proofread to make sure there are no unnecessary errors there? They want to make sure that what they look at on the outside is good. What comes to the inside, it looks good. When it comes to what's in their hand, it looks good. But also on the walls. They look at walls. Are things neat? Are things clean? Are things presented in a very professional fashion? Number 2 is sound. You probably never thought about that, have you? When people come to your church, they're listening to the sounds that are happening. Are people excited? Is there chatter? Is there a buzz in the vestibule? Is there a buzz in the lobby area? Is there a buzz in what we call the spot? What kind of sounds is going on there? Once they come into the sanctuary, remember, they are coming to worship. And so what happens before you start church is very, very important. Here at Destiny Church, we try to make sure we try to shape what people are thinking before worship even begins. Your lighting is impactful when it comes to that. What's playing overhead is impactful. It shouldn't just be loose ambient noise. It ought to be intentional music. It ought to be intentional sound. It ought to be noise to help them get prepared for worship. It ought to be music, help them become more worshipful. It ought to be intentional about what you're doing. What we do a lot here at Destiny Church is we just play videos. We play worship videos so people can start getting their mind prepared for worship as they come to the sanctuary. Remember, they've been at work all week. They've been wrestling with their kids. They've been trying to earn a living. You've got couples who've split up. You've got people who've been fighting. When they come to church, their mind is not on God when they initially come. So how do you help move their mind? It's the sounds of worship. Now watch now, they're also watching people serving in the sanctuary. When they come in initially, they want to know who's serving and what are they doing. And who are the people who are already seated in the sanctuary? Do I know them? Are they like me? Are they unlike me? We can't control that, but remember, people are watching that. Then number 3, the third sense is smell. You've got people who come into your lobby, and if there's an ungodly odor or if there's an unusual odor, they're going to pay attention to that. So let's make sure that when you come to the lobby, it smells good. When you come into the sanctuary, it smells good. Doesn't cost much to invest in some plug-ins. Make sure it's the same scent. Plug them in all around your facility. Make sure it's a pleasant smell. It's a good smell. Make sure it's not too strong now. You don't want it to be offensive. But your lobby, your sanctuary, and ladies, you know this. You want to make sure those restrooms smell good. There's nothing worse than going into a restroom and there's a malodorous smell in the restroom. Make sure the restroom smells good. I want to encourage you guys. Make sure you give extra attention to the women's restroom. Here at Destiny Church, we made special effort. We made sure that the men's room was clean. We made sure the women's room was decorated and painted. Because women oftentimes are decision makers. And they're typically the ones who use the restrooms. So make sure the women's restroom, make sure you got a fresh coat of paint. Make sure it smells good. Make sure you got those little small special touches just for the ladies. You know what I mean there, don't you? And make sure that it's fun to go into. Make sure it's pleasant. And then also, how about your classrooms? Make sure your classrooms are neat and clean. Remember, your facilities say a lot about you and what your ministry has to offer. Make sure they communicate well about who you are and who you're trying to reach. Number 4 is taste. People want to know about the people who come to your church. People often choose a church, not about what the preacher says primarily, but also about the people who attend the church, where they work at, where they live, how they communicate, their education level. So guys, we can't control all of that, but remember, people are watching that. Number 2 is the preacher. People want to know who is the preacher, what's his name, what's his character like, what's his reputation. It's important. Remember, people want to know who is the people, who are the people, who is the preacher, and what's the word being served and what's the word being preached. And also, what are people saying about their church? Do you talk about your church? Do you talk up your church or talk down your church? Or is your church invisible when it comes to your workplace, to your family, to your neighborhood, to your friends? Guys, all that's part of the assimilation process. People want to know what you think about your church and what kind of reputation they have. And then lastly, it's the touch and the feel. It's the environment. It's the decor. It's how people are dressed. You know, guys, they have this big controversy now about what people should wear to work. You know, we don't wear suits to work often very much anymore, do we? Most people now come in a professional casual. They come decent, but it's not all dressed up like people used to be. Be intentional about what you choose when it comes to your dress. And remember, guys, those who are volunteering set the tone. People take their cues from the people who are in charge. Whether it's a greeter, it's an usher, it's somebody on the praise team, it's somebody on an instrument, it's somebody collecting money, it's somebody speaking, it's somebody making an announcement. People take their cues from the official people in the church. So, we often say, come as you are. But remember, when you come as you are as a volunteer, when you come as you are as somebody who's a leader, people are watching you. I'm not saying wear a three-piece suit, but I am saying you ought to come neat, you ought to come clean, you ought to come dressed to impress. But watch this now. Dressed to impress not mean a suit anymore. It could mean I'm dressing casual, just like I am. Open collar shirt, pair of slacks on, pair of blue jeans. See, guys, people are judging you by what you wear and what you're about. Now, I want to share with you guys our process here at Destiny Church. When we have somebody who comes to be a first-time guest at our church, number one, we have someone in the parking lot to kind of greet people who are coming in and direct people. Number two, we have assigned parking spots for first-time guests. We have marked parking spots for first-time visitors, so they have premium parking no matter when they come. Now, not all of our parking, but we've got enough spots that people know that if you come in for the first time, we're welcoming you, we're expecting you, and we're glad you came. We want to treat you like a VIP. We make sure we greet people. We make sure we have coffee out, make sure we have water out, make sure people know where to take their kids so when they come in, they can have clear direction. We also make sure people, they're ushered to their seats when they come into our sanctuary. But what about when a person, they leave your church, they've come to your church, they've worshiped with you, they've heard the word, they've connected with somebody? We also try encouraging our leaders. At the end of service, don't go and connect with somebody you already know. Go and connect with somebody you've never seen before. Why? Because the people you know, they're going to wait around for you. But the people who've come for the first time, they're uncomfortable. They don't know what to do. They're trying to go home and get something to eat. But guys, when you stop them and connect with them and engage them, that can make that person convert from a first-time visitor to a second-time visitor. But what do you do once a person leaves? We talked about the assimilation team. Now, you have those Sunday teams that only function on Sunday. But then you have those teams that function outside of Sunday. What do you do 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, and 1 series or 1 event after they visit? What we try to do here at Destiny Church is 1 minute after they visit, we try to make sure that they go to our VIP reception. Our VIP reception is a 15-minute reception where I share our mission, our vision, our overall goals. I share our 12 church distinctives and what makes us unique as a church. We share with them a special gift, and we try to make sure they find a connection card. Every Sunday at church, we pass out these things called connection cards. Some call them communication cards. Some call them visitor cards. We try to capture their information, and we try to be intentional about that. But watch this now. It's not just for the first-time visitors. It's for the entire congregation. We have them fill out those connection cards, let us know about the important things that are happening in their life. Tell us about the next steps you're making as a result of the worship today, what God's doing in your life. Is there a celebration? Is there a crisis? Do you want prayer? Do you want to be involved in a ministry? You want to give your life to Christ? You want to be baptized? And yes, also, do you want to join our church? We make all those things available with the connection card. Now, I'm not sure about how things happen where you are, but where we are, we have more people that respond to the connection cards to join our church and to give their life to Christ than we have people who come down the aisle now. Every once in a while, we do the old school, come on down the aisle. But watch this, guys. We have more people who want to make that decision in private. After all, I've got a question for you. Where is that in the Bible that a person has to walk the aisle? I know it's a great Baptist tradition. I'm ordained Baptist. Don't want to give my license up. But guys, there's nowhere in the Bible where a person has to walk the aisle. People are into privacy these days. And as long as a person places their trust in the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, They can make that decision however they wish. I know what you're saying, Pastor. Romans chapter 10 verse 9 says confess with your mouth. But it does not say confess with your mouth and believe in your heart in front of an entire group of people. Interestingly, that word confess there, it means to agree with God about your sin. It's not per se talking about you have to come before a group of people and make a statement. I was at church one time and a little girl wanted to give her life to Christ. And the poor pastor embarrassed the little girl so bad, we need a statement. You can see it's a little girl. She couldn't speak that clearly. She probably couldn't really articulate her faith. But I wonder what would have happened if I would have called her into the back room, talk with her, ask her about her faith in private, if she could have articulated her faith in private better than she could in public. Just think about it, guys. We ask people to fill out a connection card for that very purpose, to take those next steps. And 1 minute after, we actually go to the VIP reception. One day after, we want to do two things. We want to make sure they get a phone call from our church, from a volunteer, thanking them for their visit, asking them how their visit went, asking them can we pray for them. Number two, we want to make sure that person gets a first-time visitor's email. In that email, we thank them for coming, ask them if they went to the VIP reception room, and then we also ask them to come back and return to our church and to fill a brief survey out. By the time we get to 1 week, actually by that Thursday, we have a handwritten note that goes out to every visitor. It's a handwritten custom card we had made. We want to send that card to people to have that special touch. We also used to send a postcard that said, thanks for popping in. You can do it at church, you can do it after church. We want to make sure that we understand that, you know what, we want to make an impression on people. Don't just do what's normal, do what's not normal. I'm not trying to criticize anybody here, but guys, send the letter. Everybody sends letter. How many of you all open your mail? If you don't want me to get something, don't want me to see it, mail it to me. An email is different, a text is different, a phone call is even better. But if you really want to stand out, don't just merely send a letter. Send something different if you're going to put something in the mail. 1 week after, we want to make sure we send them a postcard from Destiny Church or a gift card. 1 month later, we want to call them. We want to send them a letter at that point in time and then send them a free sermon, a free CD series. Remind them of who you are and what you're about. 1 quarter later, we want to make sure we invite them to our current teaching series. You know what? We got a great teaching series going on right now. It's about relationships. It's about parenting. It's about finances. It's about family. Our new upcoming series is going to be good news for tough times. How many people are going through tough times? Wouldn't a person love to receive a phone call or an email saying, you know what? We've got good news for tough times. Your pastor preaches some great sermons. Wouldn't it be great to remind people what your pastor's preaching about? They may have been in one state of mind when they first visited your church, but you've got no idea what state of mind they're in now. That's for our first-time guest. What about your second-time guest? Your second-time guest, we want to make sure they connect with somebody at your church. We want to make sure they fill their connection cards out. We want to make sure we follow up with a special email that goes directly to them. We're having t-shirts made right now for our second-time guest. Because guys, watch this now. Your guest or your visitors are the 100% potential of your growth at your church. Your guests and your visitors make up 100% of your potential of those who are going to become part of your church. That's why it's important to treat them well. But what about people who are regular attenders? Make sure your regular attenders, they come, they're part of the framework, they're starting to connect with some people, they're starting to know some people. I try making sure I find something out about them and connecting them with people of like interest, people of like age, people of similar backgrounds. Help them get into our church. I try and invite them to start serving at our church. You say, serving? They aren't members. Guys, why do you have to be a member to serve in the parking lot? Why do you have to be a member to be a greeter? Why do you have to be a member to do anything but handle money and handle kids? Why do you have to be a member to help sweep the floor? Why have to be a member to help serve coffee? Just think about it. You got some very involved people, you got some very talented people sitting there who have yet to join your church, but who still could be a particular asset. See guys, we often believe that first you've got to belong before you can behave. But that's starting to change now. People can behave and they can belong before they commit to your congregation. They can start serving before they're a part of your congregation. So I want to encourage you guys just to consider that. Are there some first day opportunities? Some things people can do the first day they start coming to your church. Now surely you don't want them on your count team counting your money. You don't want to make them a trustee. You don't want to make them an elder. You don't want to make them a deacon or license or ordain them as preachers. But there are many things they can do in your church apart from serving your kids, serving your youth, and being involved with your money. There are many things they can do. Invite them to get involved. Make sure they're clear on the baptism process. Make sure they're sure and invited to the membership process. We offer our membership process once a month, and we make a big deal. We announce it. We do an announcement and invite people to come out and be a part of that. You never know when their time is. So guys, waiting at your church, how are you being intentional about turning first-time guest into second-time guest? I've just shared with you what we do. We also have a handout there, but you can look at and see in detail how we function with our process. What do you do for second-time guests? What do you do for regular attenders? But then guys, lastly guys, for us, assimilation is also developing members. What do you do to help develop your members in your congregation? And that's where next steps come into play. It's important to challenge your existing members to take next steps. After you come to Christ, after you join the church, that's just the beginning of your journey. It's not the end of your journey. So what are those next steps? Maybe it's getting involved in a ministry. Maybe it's getting involved with a small group. Maybe it's signing up for a special class. Maybe it's taking a mission trip. Maybe it's making a special donation. Who knows what it is? Maybe it's leading the ministry instead of just participating in the ministry. What are those next steps you want people to take in your ministry? You want to have those opportunities on your connection card as well. Because church is not just about your first-time guest, but it's also about your continuing members and regular attendees. Hey, I want you guys to take a break right now. I want you guys to find one or two other people. I want you guys to talk about what could you guys do, number one, to give somebody a special gift who's a first-time guest at your church. How could you acknowledge those who are second-time guests? How can you be more intentional about turning regular attenders into members? Is your membership class clear? Is your membership process is it short enough for people to join? Is it something people want to be a part of? Are the benefits of membership clearly stated? Let's talk about these things now, and we'll come back and talk about your first impressions. God bless you. Hello again, guys. This is our last section for assimilation. I want to talk to you guys about first impressions. And I think first impression is a very important impression. Guys, you only have one time to make a first impression. A first impression is not your last impression, but it really is an important impression. When people come to your church for the first time, you want to make sure their first impression is a positive impression. There's a guy named Malcolm Gladwell. He has a book out called Blink. He talks about how people make decisions based upon their initial reactions, their gut feelings. I want to encourage you guys to make sure your first step is a good step and your first impression is a good impression. Don't forget what Bill Hybels says. Excellence honors God, but also inspires people. First impressions is all about making sure you honor God, but then as a byproduct, you're able to impress people. It's not about how much it costs, not about how big your sanctuary is. It's about how considerate are you. It's about how mindful are you of your guests and what they're experiencing, what they're going through, and what they're feeling. So often in church, we think about people who are just like us. They've committed to our church. They know everybody. They know where everything is. And we see it through old eyes. But guys, walk through your sanctuary with fresh eyes. Walk through your meeting facility with fresh eyes. So you know what? If I was a first-time guest, would I know where I was going? If I was a first-time guest, how would that stage look? If I was a first-time guest, how would the chairs look? If I was a first-time guest, how would the carpet look? If I was a first-time guest, how would the children's classroom look for me? If I was a first-time guest, would I see clutter or would I see clarity, organization, and leadership? So guys, I want to talk to you guys about first impressions. There are about 10 areas, and we'll try going through them pretty quickly. Let me give you the 10 areas, and then we'll come back and talk about each one. Number one is creating wow experiences. You ever have an experience, you know what? Wow, that was incredible. Number two, eliminate distractions. Physical distractions, mental distractions, visual distractions. Number three, we don't really want to satisfy our guests. We want them to be engaged. How can you engage their minds? How can you engage their hearts? How can you engage their families? How can you engage their interest? Number four, define how we want our guests to feel in the first 2 minutes. What do you want your guests to feel in the first 10 minutes? Number five, what teams do you need to make it happen? That's first impressions, that is. Number 6, plot your wow points. What are the strategic things? What are your checklists you want to use to make sure you have that strategic wow every week? Remember, it's like those air fresheners. That should be on your checklist. Checking the women's restroom. That should be on your checklist. Number 7, preparing for hospitality. What kind of treats can you give people? You know, here in Texas, it gets extremely hot in the summertime. The heat gets so bad, we have 20, 30 days in a row of 100 plus temperature. We relax the dress code, and then we give them cold treats on the way out. Guys, if it's hot outside, people get thirsty. They want something cold to relax with. Guys, it increases the linger time among guests. And you know what? I had a guest tell me, you know what? You guys, church, you all are always so considerate. You all thought about us and how hot it was, and you guys gave us cold treats. Point for Destiny Church. Guys, I'm not sure where you are, but guys, if it's cold where you are, what about some hot chocolate? What about some hot coffee? No, don't charge them. Give it to them for free. When you get big enough, if it's a huge expense, then you start charging. But if your church is over 500 people, you ought to be giving that stuff away and trusting God and what He's going to do with it. Number 8, plan for emergencies. Emergencies happen. Are you prepared for those emergencies? Number 9, 5 things you never want to hear from your team. And number 10, 5 things you want your guests to hear from your team. So let's get going. Number 1, creating wow experience. What was your last wow experience? Who blew you away with excellent service? There's a guy by the name of Ken Blanchard, I think it is. He's got a book out called Raving Fans. You want your first time guests to be raving fans. You know what's interesting? I often ask people, well, how'd you hear about our church? They'll say, well, we got a flyer, we got an invite card. But they often say, we heard about your church because so-and-so talked about your church. I'll say, I'm not sure I know that person. No, they don't go to your church, but they visited and told us it'd be a good church for them to go and visit. That's because they were impressed when they came here. When the last time you experienced a wow experience? Who surprised you with remarkably good quality? Who impressed you with their product value? How did their actions and behavior affect you? Jesus was great at creating wow experiences. In Mark chapter 6, you see Him doing miracles. You see Him speaking to people. Some of the things He said, He was great with wow experiences. We want to create wow experiences for each one of our guests. It makes them feel valued. It creates an atmosphere that is characterized by excellence and characterized by grace. Are you guys characterized by grace, giving people more than what they deserved? Or are you characterized by being stingy, just giving just enough? You know, I want to be a church that's known for generosity, not known for being stingy. You know, typically in church, a church is known for having their hand out to receive something, rather than having their hand closed and giving something away. Guys, this is your opportunity to make a wow statement, to make a huge impression. When it comes to wow, it's not just getting it done. It's getting it done to the best of your ability on a consistent basis. So every time somebody comes, it's just an incredible experience. We want our guests to have a positive and lasting first impression where they feel welcomed, they feel valued, they feel informed, they feel comfortable, they feel at home. It's like, you know what? We are loved by God and the members of this church. Is that what your members say when they come to your church? We want to make sure they have these things happen when they come to your church. Number 2, you want to eliminate distractions. Well, Pastor, what are some distractions? Number 1 is not knowing where to park or not having enough space to park. Make sure your parking lot has enough space. Make sure people are giving them directions and guidance. Number 2 is poor signage or no signage at all. We know where the church is, but once we get to the church, where do we go? Number 3 is sloppy landscaping. Your landscaping says something about your attention to detail. Number 4 is dirty bathrooms. That's a distraction. Number 5, congested hallways or slow check-in for your children's and youth ministry. Make sure those check-ins are quick as they can be. Make them automated. Make sure they're professional. Make sure your volunteers are smiling. Make sure your volunteers are friendly as well. You also want to make sure that people don't merely satisfy your guests. You want them to be engaged. You want to make sure that there's more to serving than just satisfying the immediate need. Go beyond. Take the extra step. A guest can remain disconnected and still be satisfied, but we don't want that. We want to make sure our guests are connected and they're also satisfied. We want our potential members and guests to feel proud to be a member of our church. We don't want to merely satisfy our guests. We want to engage our guests. Number 4, Define how we want our guests to feel in the first 10 minutes. The stuff that happens outside the auditorium is just as important as the stuff that happens inside the auditorium. We've mentioned some of those things already. Make sure you pay special attention to those things that happen outside the auditorium as well as those things that happen inside the auditorium. If you haven't made our guests say wow in the first 10 minutes, we fail. Wow is about innovation and care and addressing a constantly changing culture. Are you trying to meet people's needs based upon how they were defined 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago? You know what, guys? People are looking for different things in churches today. They aren't just looking for nice people. They're looking for excellence. They're looking for clarity. They're looking for something that's convenient for them. Looking for something that's practical. And they also want it to be worshipful and biblical. I would encourage you guys to take that extra mile and ask the question, what are people thinking about? What do they need? My wife and I went to a workshop here in Dallas on yesterday. It was by the George Barna Group. And they were talking about how do you reach mosaics and what are the characteristics of mosaics. Some of y'all may call them millennials. Those who are between the ages of 18 and 29 years old. And you know what? To our chagrin, those between 18 and 29, they aren't all the same. You got 3 different groups among them. It was a very insightful time for us. It got our minds turning. How are we doing in connecting with those between the ages of 18 and 29? It's not like going to your mother's church. How do you serve those with young families? Who are those whom you're currently missing? Who does your worship appeal to? Who does your preaching appeal to? Who does your facility appeal to? Who does your programming appeal to? You know, guys, unintentionally, we make some definitive statements about people and if they're welcome or not welcome. What do you want them to experience in the first 10 minutes? Number 5, you got to have a team that makes it happen. And we shared before about your assimilation team. It's going to be your website. It's going to be your parking lot. It's going to be your resource team. It's going to be your facility team. It's going to be those ushers, those greeters, those hosts. It's going to be everybody they connect with at your church. Your media duplication team, your cafe team, your security team, your medical response team. You've got to make sure you've got teams in place to serve the people who are going to be there on Sunday morning. And it can't be somebody who's serving the children's ministry, somebody who's singing the praise team as well, somebody who's the pastor's armor bearer. It needs to be somebody who's solely dedicated to taking care of those guests when they come. Number 6 is plot your wow. Draw a map of your campus and parking. Label all entry points. Label the path that people will come through, beginning with the drive. Be aware of peak traffic times. The drive to the parking lot, clear signage, ample parking. The walk to the main entrance. Do people know which direction to go and which door to go in? Have greeters at every entry point of your building. We have people at even our non-main entry points because you don't know what door people are going to go to. If need be, put somebody outside, say, you can go in right up there, but make sure people don't mistake a locked door for an open door. Make sure people know where to go. Prepare for hospitality. Prepare volunteers with knowledge to answer questions. You know, I automatically assume our volunteers knew how to get things done and where to go. And so I had some new volunteers sign up for the ministry, and I wanted to make sure they had information about our church. And so I put a fact sheet together, and I called it a coordinator's fact sheet. I'll share that with you guys as well. Now I put that sheet of paper together, and I sent it to all of our coordinators, people who lead ministries. I got a shocking surprise back. Almost to the person that said, you know what, I didn't know about that or how to do that. And so guys, you know what I learned? We need to make sure our volunteers are well informed enough. Make sure your volunteers have the answers to the most common questions at your church. Plan for emergencies. What will you do if somebody gets violent? What will you do if there's a fire? What do you do with severe weather? What do you do if somebody gets something stolen? What do you do with medical emergencies? I was preaching a couple of months ago, a lady who normally has seizures, guess what? She had a seizure right there in church. And how do you respond when somebody has a seizure? In less than 6 minutes, they had called the fire department, the paramedics came, they got her out of the sanctuary, they got her to a safe place. I was able to announce before my sermon was over how that person was doing and to give an update because our medical team had already put together a plan on how to respond to emergency. Here are 5 things you never want to hear from your team. I didn't know I was serving today. What's wrong with what I'm wearing? Is it too high, too tight, or too low? You shouldn't be wearing it. Remember, you're out front. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. You want to draw attention to God. Number 2, what's wrong with what I'm wearing? Number 3, you don't need me? You never want to hear that. Number 4, are we finished yet? Number 5, they, them, or you guys. They should be part of the team, and their terminology ought to be inclusive. Here's number 10. 5 things you never want your guests to hear from your team. That's not my responsibility. I don't know. No, I can't do that. They, them, or you guys. I'm just a volunteer. And one pet peeve of mine, here's a bonus one. Don't point a person where to go. Show a person where to go. Take the extra step. Go the extra mile. Don't send somebody somewhere. If you can't go, call somebody else and ask them to take that person where they need to go. Guys, it's just a briefing over assimilation, your first impressions, helping to turn your first-time guests into members of your church. I hope it's helpful. I hope you guys apply it. Hope you guys pray about it. Remember, God calls us to be hospitable. And by the way we treat first-time guests, the book of Hebrews says, be careful how you treat strangers. You never know when you're entertaining an angel. God bless you. Implement these things. I look forward to visiting your church and see how you're treating first-time guests. God bless you.